everybody, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today. I have 3 different shaker cards to share with you today for our Studio Monday video. And I'm going to be showcasing a couple of different techniques, actually 3 in total, that are really fun and easy to create, and they all feature products that are from our new one-of-a-kind release that we just had a couple weeks ago. So the first card I'm going to be creating features the really beautiful floral burst border die. We're going to be using this to create a trail of flowers that are going to be die cut into a piece of cardstock that you see here. This is actually watercolor paper because I'm going to add some watercoloring on top. We're going to use this to create a shaker card, and the shaker card is going to be what I'm calling a stuffed shaker card. So it's going to be really full of sequins and it's not going to shake a whole lot, but it's a really cool effect and I think you're really going to like the end result. Now what you see me doing here is I'm prepping my Nuvo Aqua Flow brush. This is a yellow color and it's so beautiful. The Nuvo Aqua Flow brushes are really fun. They are very similar in body to the Spectrum Noir sparkle pens, but these don't have any shimmer to them. These are actual true watercolors in a brush form that have a really nice tip to them. And you can color in with these, both stamped images, but I'm going to be using them to create the background. So I'm going to dab this color all over the background. I'm going to basically be creating a hot mess here. It's just going to look absolutely awful. All of this just scribbles of color all over the background. But trust me, it's going to turn out really cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Nuvo spray bottle. This lets out a really, really fine mist. So it's really great for controlling how much water you get and you don't get any big splatters. It's really, really great. What I'm doing is I'm taking that spray bottle and spritzing the color in different directions. I'm letting it spread out. And that water is helping it move. I dried that with my heat gun, so you can see I've got some harder lines and some soft lines, and this color really spread nicely. I'm taking some more water, and this time I'm flicking it into my hand so that way I can create water splatters, because these Aqua Flow brushes do react with water, so you get a splattery effect, as you see here. All of the coloring that I've done in today's video does feature the Aqua Flow brushes. I'm not focusing on how I created the cards completely. I'm mostly focusing on the techniques of creating the shaker cards because this video is quite long. So I want to show you how I created the shaker cards themselves rather than the entire card from start to finish, because I do have 3 ideas to share with you. So what you see me doing here is I'm adding some acetate to the back side of my panel. This is creating the window area for my shaker, so that way the sequins will show up in the inside. I'm now taking some foam tape and I'm cutting it down so that way I can fit the foam tape around the different areas of these flowers. I want just the area of the flowers to have the sequins in them, so you can see I'm filling that little well that I've created with the sequins, and I'm putting a ton of them in here. I want this shaker card to be so full of sequins that it hardly moves, because I want this to basically create a fill of color behind these flowers. I'm using a darker shade of yellow cardstock to use as the backing for my shaker card. This will show up between the sequins and you can see the really great effect that we get here. This card is so shiny and yellow and bright and happy. I think this would be a perfect card to send to anybody to brighten their day. So what I did to finish off this card was I took a sentiment from our script thanks die. I layered that a couple of times together using black cardstock, so I created a nice thick sentiment, and I added a little bit of glossy accents over top. I used a supporting sentiment down there along the bottom on some red cardstock, and then for those leaves, I actually die cut that same floral border die from some green cardstock and then used those pieces to create the leaves. And those little dots that you see in between the leaves, those are created with some Nuvo gloss drops, and I just added some of those in between certain areas just to fill in a little bit more. Alright, so my next technique is I want to show you how you can create a shaker card that has a beautiful colored image behind the shaker. Now this does sound counterintuitive because you think, well, I colored in this image, I don't want to cover it up with sequins, you can't see the coloring. But trust me, it turns out so cool, especially when you use clear sequins, like I'm using these clear flowers from Pretty Pink Posh to create this card. So I first started off by stamping my image here. This is the Bouquet of Thanks stamp set, and this is from our new one-of-a-kind release. I'm stamping this into the center of some white watercolor paper. I'm pressing it down really good, and I've stamped it with some clear ink, so that way I can heat emboss it with some white embossing powder. And you could stamp this with any type of ink and whatever color you like. I just preferred the white heat embossing because I wanted to be able to have something that was light colored but also helped hold in the watercoloring that I'm doing here with the Nuvo Aquaflow brushes. So again, I'm not going to show all the details of how I colored in this flower completely because again, this is all about the shaker cards themselves, not so much all of the other details. But as you can see, I took the Aquaflow brushes and layered the colors together to color in each of the petals of all these different flowers. I used a variety of different Aquaflow brushes. I used pink and red and yellow and all like a yellow-orange. For the background here, I'm using a teal color. This was really fun. I used that teal color to add some like shadow areas around the flowers and then blended it out with my water brush and then lifted off all that color with my dry rag, and it created really light spots. So it creates this really cool contrast. And again, this looked like a hot mess around the outside edges once I finished in all the coloring because you see I didn't go all the way to the edges. But that's because I'm going to be using the coordinating die as the window for this shaker card. Now, if you were going to be using just a simple shape as the window to go over top of the stamped image, you definitely would want to fill in that background a little bit more and make it look a little bit more nice. But because I have just the outline of the actual die cut itself that coordinates with this image, I didn't need to go very far. So what you're seeing me do here is I'm taking a stitched rectangle die and also that coordinating die, and I'm taping these together so I can just run them through my Big Shot machine. You don't have to add the stitching detail that I'm using here from that stitched rectangle die. You could simply just cut a rectangle or whatever shape you'd like for your card panel. But I wanted this to have the stitching detail, so I went ahead and used the stitched rectangles. What this is allowing me to do is I'm going to be able to layer this piece right over top of my colored images. And you can see it hides those funky edges of my coloring with that background perfectly, but yet I still see that beautiful teal color showing through along the edges. And this is going to create a really neat shaker. Wait until you see it at the end of this part of the video. So what you see me doing here is I'm taking some adhesive and I'm just adding this around the different areas of my panel, which is going to be the window for my shaker. I'm adding that adhesive so I can take the acetate and place that right on top. Now I've got my window ready to go. I'm going to add foam tape all the way around this flower to create the shaker well. And I'm going ahead and making sure that I get this foam tape all the way around the edges. I don't want any sequins going too far away from the edges of the window. I want them to really be contained right there within that die cut. So I'm taking some really pretty clear flowers from Pretty Pink Posh. I really love these. These are really delicate and beautiful, and it has that great sparkling clear appearance, so they match with pretty much everything. So I'm sprinkling those into my shaker well. Now, because I need to line this up with my stamped and colored image, I found that the best way to do this was to take another layer of acetate and sandwich those sequins in between the two layers of acetate. Now, I actually find that the sequins shake around inside the acetate really nicely, so I may do this more frequently for shaker cards, even when I don't need to go ahead and have this double layer so that I can see through and add the panel on top of the colored image. I may just do this more frequently just because I like the way the sequins move in between the acetate pieces. But anyway, the reason I did this was because I needed to line this panel up over top of my stamped image, and I needed to be able to do that so that way the sequins didn't go flying everywhere. So by having that backing already put in place with that second piece of acetate, it made lining this up so much easier. Looking at those flowers with those sequins on top, it's just so beautiful, and it creates a really neat effect to have the sequins kind of floating over top of your colored stamped images. Especially in this particular case where it's a flower, it kind of has a very ethereal look to it, and I really love the end result. Alright, idea number 3. I'm going to show you how I created this really fun layered die cut window. And this is a really great way to have a unique way to use your window dies in a fun way to create shaker cards. So what I got here is I've got 3 pieces of cardstock. I've got this really pretty frond collage window die. I'm going to die cut this from all these pieces of cardstock, but I want to have them offset from each other. So I'm going to use the holes that are in the die to my advantage for this. These holes are for when you want to be able to pop the die cut out of the die itself when you're cutting. It's really handy to be able to do that. But I'm going to use that as a guide for my die cutting. So I put a piece of tape there to mark that particular hole on my die and use that as a guiding point. So I've die cut my light green piece of paper with the hole perfectly straight on that paper. Now I'm going to take that die, line it up on the Audrey blue cardstock, and rotate it just a little bit. So that way when I die cut this Audrey blue cardstock now has that frond pattern die cut at a slightly different angle than the light green. So as you can see here as I line them up, they don't line up perfectly. They're now rotated just a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing with the darker teal cardstock, and I'm going to rotate it even more. So that way it's even more offset than the Audrey blue cardstock. So as I take this one out of the die cutting machine, you can see I've got my 3 pieces here. I'll layer them all up together, and you can see that all of the fronds don't match up well together, but they all continue in the same pattern, and it creates this really neat circular design. It looks so cool. So I'm going to attach all of these together because I need to trim them down, and I want them to stay in the exact same place so that way when I go to adhere them all together, they're all lined up perfectly. So I'm going to attach them together with some micropore tape on the top parts of these panels because I'm going to end up cutting these down into a square. To help me with that, I've got the basic squares dies from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to run this entire piece through my Big Shot machine. Now, the Big Shot machine isn't going to cut through all 3 layers of cardstock, but I knew this, and I knew that when I die cut it, it would leave an impression of that rectangle on the bottom layer. So I could go ahead and just line that back up and run it through again, and they're all die cut to the exact same size, and the circles all line up perfectly. So here's my 3 pieces. I'm going to layer the darkest color on the top, and then the lightest color is going to go on the bottom. So I'm going to attach all of these together. I've got the lightest color on the bottom, like I said. Now I'm attaching that to the Audrey blue color. I'm going to layer those pieces together, and then I'll be able to attach that dark teal color on top of the Audrey blue. And we'll have a nice, really cool layered effect with those fronds. After I attach them, I'm going to take a piece of acetate and attach that to the back side of this entire piece. Now this card is really cool because we're not only creating a layered die cut window, we're also going to be creating a see-through shaker card. And I'll show you how we did that in a second. I've attached the acetate to the back side of my entire panel here, and I'm going to bring in a white cardstock card base. This is a little bit larger than my little panels that have my windows cut into them, and I'm going to line up that frond circle die onto the card base just the exact same way that I did for the light green piece that's on the bottom layer, because I want these to be pretty much lined up perfectly. It ended up not turning out to be perfectly exact. I didn't have it lined up perfectly straight, I guess, when I ran it through my die cutting machine, but it actually looked neat to see the layered white pieces behind the light green. It was a nice extra layer, so it ended up working out just fine. But as you can see here, I've got my window, and I'm going to go ahead and layer that piece right on top eventually, but first we need to add in our sequins. So I'm bringing in some more foam tape, and I'm going to add this in a circle shape all the way around my window. Now it's really easy to create that circle shape when you take the backing off. It's just so much easier to maneuver the tape. So I ended up creating 2 layers of foam tape for this shaker card, and you'll see that the sequins move really nicely with those 2 layers. For the other 2 cards I used just 1. So I'm bringing in some sequins here from Lucy's Cards. This is a really pretty green mix. And then I'm also going to use some moonshine sequins from Simon Says Stamp as well. These are kind of like a confetti looking sequin. I'm going to take that same trick of using the double pieces of acetate. So I'm going to take another sheet of acetate and attach that to the back side of my shaker because again, we want this to be see-through. So we want to be able to see through from the front of the shaker all the way to the inside of the card. So we need to have another layer of that clear acetate behind there so that way we can see through to the inside of the card. So I'm adding some adhesive around the edges of that piece, and I'm going to line this up with my card base. Once I've lined it up with my card base, we can see right to the inside of the card. And so you can see we ended up with a total of 3 different shaker cards, all with a thank you theme. And you can see they all feature a unique way of taking shaker cards and turning them into something really cool. So I hope that today's video has been really inspiring for you and helped you kind of get outside the box in creating shaker cards. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you will give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more inspiration. You can find still pictures and products used over at the blog, which a link is in the video description, so you can go ahead and check all that out. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!